So tonight's night is titled Low-Key Upset. And I think the title is very fitting. As I was sitting down trying to figure out what I was going to talk about tonight, I started to first reflect on the title. When I think of something being low-key, I think of something being subtle, quiet, something that you don't want everybody to know, and that is sadness. I think it is safe to say that all of us here have experienced sadness. It is a common human emotion that everybody feels. Sadness is the pain caused by the awareness of someone or some personally experienced loss, disappointment, or misfortunes. Everyone experiences sadness differently. And like the title of tonight, I personally do it low key. I was stoked to start my sophomore year of college. Even though COVID was at its peak, UNC thought it was appropriate to bring everybody back to campus. I was lucky enough to head back to college and to leave Texas behind. I thought to myself, this year will be different. I'm gonna go to every party possible, accumulate the most friends, get a boyfriend, and become the person everybody wants to be around. To my surprise, within 2 weeks of being on campus, everything shut down, and everyone began packing their stuff to go back home. However, I decided to stay with the dreams that everything I had hoped for this year was going to become a reality, even if we had to stand 6 feet apart. Sooner rather than later, I realized that was far-fetched. I was taking a lot of credit hours while in the process filling out my application for nursing school. I would wake up at 7 a.m. and go to bed at 2 a.m., always studying, doing homework, but the feeling of never being enough was constant. I would cry myself to sleep and drown myself in a wave of sadness that never seemed to go away. It became a routine, do school during the day and cry during the night. I did begin to make new friends. However, I only allowed myself a certain amount of hours during the day to do something fun with them. I always felt guilty for doing something fun instead of studying. I presented myself with a smile everywhere I went, pretending everything was going to be okay. Fake it till you make it, I would tell myself. Eventually, my sadness would go away, I thought. At the same time, I began leading a Bible study through the Catholic Center. Not only did I want to deepen my faith, but I wanted to help others do the same. I built this idea that I could not fix my faith with the profound sadness that I was feeling. They were like two parallel lines that could never meet and had nothing to do with each other. God was not going to help me snap out of this feeling because it was my own fault I was feeling this way. It was me that wanted to continue to cry myself to sleep. It was me the one that wanted to take all these classes. It was me the one that wanted to get into nursing school. I would tell myself, once I get into nursing school, everything's going to be okay. I made close friends, but I couldn't share this with them. I just kept it low key, all to myself. No matter what has been your experience with sadness, these experiences are real. It is important to know that there are different degrees in which we experience sadness. The emotion itself is neither good or bad. People deal with sadness in many different ways. Some people rather not talk about it and run away from it because it makes them uncomfortable. There are many people that rather bottle their feelings up because showing sadness is a sign of weakness. I was also one of those people. Someone that wanted to make the sadness go away by any means, but that's not appropriate. Dealing with emotions is not easy. It's easier to than to face reality. We put on a happy face, even though we'll feel the deep sadness inside of us. We tell everyone it's okay when indeed it's not okay. I now realize that it is okay to feel sad while still trusting God's plan. It is hard to find a healthy coping mechanism. There are many coping mechanisms that can help us mute or do our emotions. Instead of acknowledging and facing our emotions, we turn to things that give us temporary happiness. We turn to social media, music, or art, or checklists. I can attest that my life has been full of checklists. And while yes, I received instant gratification knowing that I had completed all the tasks I had assigned myself to that day, I felt even more devastated the days that I was not able to check everything off. Do not get me wrong, these coping mechanisms are not inherently bad. They become problematic when they serve as a means to escape. Escaping is never the answer. It just ignores the problem but never fixes it. In other ways, some of us might find that we do extreme opposites. We dwell on our sadness and become trapped inside of it. It feels like we're never going to escape no matter what we do. I can also attest to this. We might feel like no one could ever understand what we're going through. It is easy to fall into the temptation of comparison. Social media is everywhere around us, and it may seem like everybody's having a perfect life except us. Sometimes an immense feeling of sadness can lead us to a serious depression. Sometimes there are many factors that can lead us into depression, but regardless of why and how people experience depression, it is nothing to be ashamed of. There are many people who can help us, such as school counselors, Liz, or even one of us core members. We know for the fact that even Jesus felt sadness during his life. He felt sadness when he witnessed people experience injustices due to the sins of others. Jesus experienced an even deeper sadness known as grief. Do we know the shortest verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. We see Jesus' grief in the story of Lazarus. The Gospel of John tells us that Lazarus was one of Jesus' friends whom he loved. Lazarus got very ill, and his sister Mary and Martha sent out a message for Jesus to let him know. John 11:4 states, "But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This illness does not lead to death, but it is for God's glory, so that the man of God may be glorified through it.'" This simply tells us that Jesus knew what was coming. When Martha sees Jesus, she tells him that if he had been there, her brother would have not died. Jesus tells her again that he will rise again. However, even during this difficult time, Jesus continues to preach the truth as he says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everybody who lives and believes in me will never die." And he asked Martha, "Do you believe this?" When Jesus met Lazarus' other sister Mary, John 11:33 says, "When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved." It is crazy, even though Jesus knew that God was going to be glorified through Lazarus' death, he still sees the pain everyone around him is going through. Jesus' sorrow is real. He mourns Lazarus' death and was present during that moment. Again, Jesus is overcome by the emotion as he reaches Lazarus' tomb, and through his emotion, he thanks his Father and calls Lazarus to rise. Lazarus is not the only one that Jesus has immense compassion towards. Jesus continues to place himself in the shoes of those who were suffering. Jesus heals a woman who has suffered from a hemorrhage for 12 years. He intercedes for the woman who was going to be stoned because she had committed adultery and resurrected a young girl. He saw the hurting and sorrow and he entered into it. Jesus calls us to encounter others suffering in the same way. We're called to be there for others, acknowledge the emotions they're feeling, and remind them of God's glory and saving power. Jesus not only experienced grief and saddened himself with the death of Lazarus, but also enters into the sorrows of others. We're called to acknowledge our own sadness and express it. That expression looks different in everybody. It might manifest in crying with a friend, or alone, journaling, listening to music or art. Regardless of the form, expressing sadness gives Jesus permission to enter into our pain and start the healing process. We're not alone. While Jesus does not actively will our sadness or hurt, he calls us to bring us our emotions to him. He calls us to heal and grow and mature. Allowing God to enter into our life in the difficult times can look different for everybody. For some of us, that might mean asking a family member, a friend, or even a professional to hear our burdens and sadness. For me, I had to learn how to let God into my sadness. I began to pray for his intercession in everything I did, even if it was as simple as a chemistry problem. I learned that my troubles were also Jesus' troubles. Jesus was there to help me carry my cross the day I decided to pick it up. And in the same place, Jesus invites us to share his cross that led to his resurrection. The tragedy and suffering of the cross eventually leads to the glorification of God. By joining our suffering with Christ, we can find joy in our sadness. Jesus will point us back to his glory, just as he did when he experienced deep sadness at Nazareth during Lazarus' death. However, let me clarify. I'm not saying that uniting our suffering with Jesus will make our suffering go away. It does mean that we can be filled with joy and hope that Jesus' resurrection promises comfort in eternal life, even through our sadness. For it is in heaven that we will no longer experience sadness and suffering. So as we continue to experience suffering on earth, may we unite with Christ's suffering and hope that one day we will suffer no more. And to close it off, I would like to reflect on the same question that Jesus asked Martha. Do you believe this?